Number 10. A hard pass. Ariel Ingert offered her services to 3 police officers back in 2015 to have them drop a bunch of charges they were trying to bring her up on. 24-year-old Ariel, on the outside, looked like your typical young woman, but apparently this girl was what you might call open. After she was pulled over in Palm Harbor, Florida, and dragged off to jail, she thought of the only thing she could do to get out of her situation. She had a blood alcohol level of 0.162, over twice the legal limit. She also had a huge bag of marijuana in her purse. And so, once the police got her back to the station and processed, she offered them something she thought they wouldn't be able to say no to. Much to her surprise, no one would take her up on her sexy offer. She first told Deputy Brian Sudbrink that if he dropped the charges and let her go, she'd do whatever he wanted, anything at all. But he refused. Then when she was searched at the detention facility, officers discovered a small bag of cocaine hiding in her bra. As the charges became more and more serious, she became more and more desperate. Finally, Ariel offered her expert services to Deputies Obed Munoz and Eric Biddle. She told them that if they let her go, she would give them each a special treat they would never forget. But in the end, none of the officers would take her up on her lewd offers, and she was charged with 3 counts of bribery on top of the drugs and DUI charges. Number 9. McDonald's bribe. Martell Williams was only 15 years old when he spent 2 nights locked up in the Lake County Juvenile Detention Center. It was February 2022, and he was charged with attempted murder and aggravated battery. And yet, Martell did nothing wrong. The teenager wasn't a criminal in the slightest. He was arrested by the Chicago police and then bribed by the cops into confessing to a murder. This is by far one of the ugliest stories involving the abuse of police powers that's come out in the first few months of 2022. The teenager couldn't have possibly been responsible for the incident on February 4th. At the same time the murder was happening at the dollar store, he was playing in a high school basketball game. It was physically impossible to be there. Nonetheless, 2 officers pulled him out of class and arrested him in connection with the event. According to his family attorney, the police then coerced him into a confession. They tried to bribe him with McDonald's like a 5-year-old. The cop said, "Look, just tell us you were there and we'll take you home in 10 minutes. He refused, so the cops put the teenager in jail and he had to spend 2 miserable nights locked up. The police only let him out once his family was able to provide hard evidence that the kid wasn't even in the general area of the shooting. The officers have dropped the charges, but they are in some seriously hot water. The case has exploded and gained a lot of viral traction. Martell's lawyers are going to do all they can to bring these McDonald's bribing officers to justice. Number 8. The Impersonator. Rebecca Piper has pleaded guilty to 1 count of felony harassment and a very bizarre fake bribery attempt involving her ex and a judge. The charges were filed against her back on September 21, 2021. She was accused of sending an inappropriate package to the judge's house. But to make things more confusing, she made it seem as though her ex sent the package, not her. It all started a year before when Rebecca and a man were in the middle of a custody battle. At the time, Rebecca was a police officer in Minnesota. Her ex was trying to take her kid. 4 days before they were supposed to be in court for the custody hearing, Rebecca sent the package to the judge. The judge was shocked to see a floral box on her doorstep with the words, "Eat A," printed on the inside. Inside the box was a piece of chocolate in the shape of a particular piece of male anatomy. After the box came a suspicious letter. The letter urged the judge to impose an action in favor of Rebecca's ex. If that action was made, a $5,000 cash bribe was promised. But the judge wasn't buying it. She had already been ruling in the man's favor and didn't think it would make sense for him to risk it all over a bribe. She also remembered allegations that Rebecca had previously forged his signature. The judge took the letter for criminal analysis, and the investigators found Rebecca's fingerprints on it. They also found credit card statements connecting Rebecca to the inappropriate chocolate. Rebecca lost her job as a cop. She was put on probation, and she was sentenced to anger management, and she really messed herself up for the custody hearing. The moral of the story here is that you probably shouldn't try to fake bribe a judge. Number 7. Unhealthy restaurants. 3 restaurant owners on a Brooklyn block have been arrested for trying to bribe a city employee. John and Jack DeSanto and Robert Cuba tried to give money to the city employee in exchange for inside information on an upcoming health department inspection. The trio had recently won big on Super Bowl bets and were hoping all that cash would get them by on their next health inspections. But it didn't work. All three business owners were foiled by the employee, who turned their shady intentions over to the city's Department of Investigation. According to Commissioner Daniel Court, health inspections are supposed to be rigorous and conducted with no warning. This ensures that all restaurant establishments are following health and safety protocols, but the defendants used corruption and cash to try and cheat the system. In January of 2020, John DeSanto reached out to the city employee with the offer. The employee turned on them immediately, and an undercover investigator joined up to catch them in the act. The trio were caught red-handed trying to exchange $50,000 for information about the upcoming inspections. And this is no surprise, considering all three of the restaurants have received sanitary violations in the past. One of them was cited for having filth flies in the food area in 2017. It makes you wonder just how dirty these restaurants were if they were willing to pay $50,000 to cheat the health inspections. Gross. Number 6. An inappropriate relationship. Katie Browder was the assistant coach of the Ole Miss softball team, Ole Miss being the University of Mississippi. In the summer of 2021, she was accused of participating in an inappropriate relationship with one of her student athletes. This came as a pretty big shock to the community, especially since Katie is a married woman. And if getting frisky with her students wasn't a big deal enough, the head coach got in on the scandal as well. He was accused of covering up the relationship by bribing players on the team. He offered them scholarship money if they would remain quiet and keep the affair from getting out. Anyone who's ever spent time with students knows that this is impossible. The head coach could have offered them $1 million in cash each. Still, somebody would have snitched. And that's exactly what happened. The information got out, and there was an investigation. Plus, the student Katie was allegedly in a relationship with was dating another member of the team. Everybody appeared to be cheating on everybody. Just 1 week after the accusations, the investigation was called to a close. Katie and Jamie were cleared by the school's office of any wrongdoing. The head coach was cleared of any bribery charges, and the assistant coach was cleared of getting a little too close and comfortable with the student. What do you think actually happens in this case? Was this a classic example of the school covering up a toxic situation? It seems strange that so many people would come forth with the same accusations, only to have the whole thing swept under the rug a week later. We're not saying these people are innocent or guilty one way or another, but what do you think? Let us know in the comments below. And before the video's over, don't forget to subscribe. Number 5. Drug smuggling cop. An ex-cop from Montebello has pleaded guilty to bribery after he admitted to his superiors that he accepted a minimum of $14,000 from a gang member. His name is Rudolph Peterson, and had been working as a police officer when he agreed to be paid in cash to let a U-Haul truck move freely to its destination. As you can probably guess, the U-Haul was filled with illegal drugs. Rudolph's job was to escort the truck to its destination, thereby protecting it from law enforcement. In return for his services, he earned himself $10,000 in cash in a paper bag. It gets worse from here. Not only was he helping to move huge quantities of illegal drugs, but he also snitched on the snitches. He used the law enforcement database to find information on snitches, and then handed the information over to the gang member he was working with. For each snitch he ratted on, he earned himself a cash payment. Rudolph left the police department in August of 2020 and was apprehended soon after. It came out that his treachery started in the middle of 2018 when he sat down to have dinner with the gang member. He'd only been on the police force for 2 years and was already dirty. Tisk tisk. Number 4. Caught on body cam. On June 16, 2016, Margaret Garcia was pulled over for speeding. It was the middle of the night in Florida, and she was driving recklessly way too fast. When the officer pulled her over, things got weird. According to the arrest report, when he approached the car, he could immediately smell marijuana. He also saw a big bag of pot sitting in the center console. When the Miami-Dade officer asked for her license and registration, she pulled the top of her dress down and exposed her bra. And then instead of handing the officer her license like she was supposed to, Margaret handed the officer a fistful of cash. Unfortunately for Margaret, the officer's body cam was recording everything. Even if he had been so inclined as to take the offer, his body cam wouldn't let him. The officer even gave her a chance to put the money away. He told her, "You don't owe me any money." But she didn't get the hint. She kept the money in her hand and asked what he wanted to do. She said she just wanted to go home and that she was prepared to do whatever it took. Long story short, Margaret did not get home that night. She was dragged to jail and booked on charges of bribery and possession of cannabis. Number 3. The bar brawler. Joe Angel Hernandez got into a bar fight in Austin, Texas. It was November 1st, 2021. Joe was with a group of people in a bar called Poor Choices when a fight broke out between them and another group. The fight was disrupted and Joe and his friends were kicked out. They could have just called it a night and went home, but they didn't. The gang was spotted lurking outside the bar carrying knives, looking for the people they had been in a fight with earlier. If the police hadn't showed up when they did, there could have been a very serious incident of violence. Someone may have been stabbed that night. But the cops came and arrested the thugs waiting outside the bar. Joe ran from the Austin police, only to get caught about a block later. The officer used a stun gun to bring him to the ground, then walked him back to the patrol car. As Joe was sitting in the back of the car, he offered the officer $300 in cash to just let him go. Before the officer could refuse, he increased it to $500. "Nobody will know," he told the officer. Joe wanted the cop to take the money, open the door, and pretend nothing happened. When the officer refused, Joe offered him a total of $600. But $600 wasn't enough to tarnish the officer's integrity. He took Joe Hernandez to jail and charged him with evading a police officer and bribery. Number 2. Drinking and driving. There were a lot of failed bribes in November of 2021. On the 18th, just 2 weeks after Joe in Austin tried to bribe a cop, a woman in Boca Raton had the same thing happen to her. Deputies pulled over Danilina Maria after she drove into a traffic sign, ran a stop sign, and then smashed into the guardrail on the side of the road. Clearly, she was too drunk to drive. When the officer pulled her over, she couldn't speak properly, her eyes were glazed, and her entire car reeked of alcohol. She failed the sobriety test and was promptly put in handcuffs. That's when the begging started. She was practically crying, urging the officers not to arrest her. She cried about being a single mother. She moaned and moaned, until finally she tried bribery. Marina literally asked, "How much do I have to pay you to not go to jail?" As it turned out, there was no amount of money she could pay. She was brought to jail anyway, charged with DUI and bribery of a public servant, and then released on a $6,000 bond. And number 1, eating your own bribe. In 2014, a man in Russia tried to bribe a police officer. When the officer declined the bribe and informed the man that he was committing a crime, the individual stuffed the money into his mouth and ate it. Yes, he ate his own bribe. According to the reports from Russia, the man was arrested by the police at a train station in the city of Tinda for suspicious behavior. When the police took the man to the station, they found he was in possession of an illegal weapon. It was just a knife, but clearly not for cooking purposes. To try and get himself out of the situation, the man put 3,000 rubles on the table. That's the equivalent of about $86, but only in 3 bills. The officer didn't care about the 3,000 rubles, and so the man stuffed the notes in his mouth and ate them. Alas, that's only caused more problems. The cops took him to the local hospital and had the rubles surgically removed by gastroscopy. A thin tube was lowered into his stomach, and the notes were pulled out before they could be digested. The bribery charge had him looking at up to 2 years in prison. Have you or someone you know ever tried to bribe their way out of a situation? Let us know your stories in the comments below, and thanks for watching. If you like this video, remember to subscribe. See you next time.